6 months later, Sarah Martinez returned to Thunder Valley Gun Range. But this time, everything was different. She carried her own custom rifle case and wore the navy blue jacket of the United States National Shooting Team. The same gravel parking lot crunched under her feet, but now she walked with the confident stride of someone who had found their calling. Inside the range, Frank looked up from the counter and broke into a wide grin. "Well, if it isn't our local celebrity. How'd you do at Nationals?" "First place in women's precision rifle," Sarah replied with a smile that still held traces of amazement at her own journey. "I actually came back to thank everyone who helped me get started." The news rippled through the range like wildfire. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered around the counter, including Ruth, the retired Army veteran, and several of the regular shooters who had witnessed Sarah's remarkable first day. "First place at Nationals?" Ruth exclaimed, pulling Sarah into a hug. "Oh, honey, I knew you had something special, but this exceeds even my wildest expectations." The retired Army veteran, who had introduced himself months earlier as Colonel James Morrison, nodded approvingly. "I've been following your competition results online. That performance at Camp Perry was exceptional. You broke a 30-year-old range record." Sarah felt a familiar warmth at the praise, but also a deep sense of gratitude. "None of this would have happened if you all hadn't believed in me that first day. I almost left after the first few comments, but you gave me a chance to discover something I never knew about myself." Frank wiped his hands on a rag, his expression thoughtful. "You know, Sarah, in all my years running this place, I've learned that the best shooters often come from the most unexpected places. But what you accomplished goes beyond just natural talent." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I mean the dedication it took to go from complete beginner to national champion in 6 months. That's not just about having good eyes and steady hands. That's about having the heart and mind of a true competitor." Ruth pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a photograph. "I hope you don't mind, but I kept this picture from your first day. It's you with that little .22, looking terrified but determined." The photograph showed Sarah in her floral sundress, gripping the small pistol with white knuckles, her face a mixture of fear and intense concentration. Looking at it now, she could hardly believe how much had changed. "I was absolutely terrified," Sarah admitted. "I kept thinking I was going to embarrass myself and prove everyone right about people like me not belonging here." "People like you," Colonel Morrison repeated. "You mean people who challenge stereotypes and prove that excellence can come from anywhere?" Before Sarah could respond, the familiar sound of expensive equipment being unloaded caught everyone's attention. The Precision Shooting Club had arrived for their weekly practice session. The same 3 men who had challenged Sarah on her first day were setting up their gear, unaware of who was at the counter. "Hey, Frank," their leader called out. "We need lanes 12 through 15 for our practice session. Hope you don't have any amateurs shooting today who might disturb our concentration." The irony was not lost on anyone present. Sarah exchanged glances with Ruth, who was trying hard not to smile. Frank cleared his throat loudly. "Actually, we do have a competitive shooter here today. You might remember her." The Precision Shooting Club leader turned around, his expression shifting from confidence to recognition to something approaching embarrassment as he saw Sarah's team jacket. "Sarah, how did you?" "Hello again," Sarah said simply. "I took your advice about competitive shooting." The man's face cycled through several different emotions before settling on genuine respect. "I heard about the national championship. Congratulations. That's incredible." His 2 teammates had joined him, both recognizing Sarah from the news coverage her victory had generated. The local papers had run feature stories about the hometown girl who went from complete beginner to national champion, inspiring shooting clubs and self-defense programs across the state. "I owe you an apology," the team leader continued. "Actually, I owe everyone here an apology for my attitude that day. You taught me something important about making assumptions." Sarah nodded graciously. "We all learn from our experiences. That day taught me something important too, that I could do things I never imagined possible." Colonel Morrison stepped forward. "Sarah, would you mind sharing with everyone what the real secret was? How you made such incredible progress so quickly?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I think it was a combination of things. The natural ability helped, but what really made the difference was finding people who believed in me before I believed in myself. Ruth started training me the very next week, Frank let me practice here for free until I could afford my own equipment. And all of you created an environment where I felt safe to learn and grow." She paused, looking around at the faces that had become so familiar and supportive. But there was something else. That break-in at my apartment didn't just make me want to learn self-defense. It made me realize I had been living my whole life accepting other people's assumptions about what I could and couldn't do. Ruth wiped her eyes, clearly moved by the speech. "And now look at you. National champion, role model for young women, and living proof that extraordinary ability can emerge from the most ordinary circumstances." "Actually," Sarah said, reaching into her equipment bag, "I brought something to show everyone." She pulled out a framed photograph from the national championship ceremony. It showed her on the podium, gold medal around her neck, holding the American flag. But what made the picture special was what she had written across the bottom. "To Thunder Valley Gun Range. Thank you for showing me who I really was. Sarah Martinez, national champion." Frank accepted the photograph with obvious emotion. "This is going right behind the counter where everyone can see it. You've made all of us proud." "There's one more thing," Sarah added. "I've been asked to establish a training program for new shooters, especially women who might be intimidated by the sport. I was hoping to base it here, if you'd be willing to host it." The response was immediate and unanimous. Everyone began talking at once, offering support and suggestions for the program. Even the Precision Shooting Club members volunteered to help with advanced training and equipment recommendations. As the excitement settled, a young woman in her early 20s approached hesitantly from the entrance. She wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, and her eyes held the same mixture of fear and determination that Sarah remembered feeling 6 months earlier. "Excuse me," the young woman said quietly. "I saw the sign about beginner classes. I've never shot before, but I'd like to learn." Sarah smiled, recognizing herself in the newcomer's nervous energy. "I'm Sarah, and I'd be happy to help you get started. What's your name?" "Jessica. Well, I had some trouble at my college, and I want to learn to protect myself." Frank looked up from behind the counter, his expression completely different from the skeptical doubt he had shown Sarah months earlier. "Jessica, you've come to the right place. Sarah here is going to be our head instructor for new students, and I guarantee you'll be in excellent hands." Sarah began walking Jessica toward the safety video station, but stopped to address the entire group one final time. "6 months ago, I walked through that door as scared and inexperienced as anyone could be. I faced ridicule and doubt, but I also found mentors and supporters who changed my life forever." She gestured toward Jessica. "Now it's time for me to pass along what you all gave me. The belief that anyone, regardless of background or appearance, can achieve excellence if they're given proper support and encouragement." As Sarah began explaining range safety to Jessica, the same way Ruth had done for her, the circle of her journey felt complete. The young woman who had once been dismissed as unsuitable for firearms had become not just a champion, but a teacher and inspiration for the next generation. Frank hung the championship photograph behind the counter, positioned so that every person entering Thunder Valley Gun Range would see it immediately. Below it, he placed a small sign that read, "Excellence comes in all forms. Never underestimate the person beside you." The Precision Shooting Club set up their equipment quietly, their previous arrogance replaced by a new understanding of what real skill looked like. Ruth prepared a training schedule for Jessica and the other new students Sarah expected to attract. Colonel Morrison made notes about advanced techniques he could teach once the basics were mastered. Outside, the Texas sun continued its arc across the sky, just as it had on that first morning when Sarah took her tentative steps toward discovering her true potential. But inside Thunder Valley Gun Range, something fundamental had changed. The culture of assumption and stereotyping had been replaced by one of opportunity and respect. Sarah's story had become more than just a personal triumph. It had transformed an entire community's understanding of what was possible when people were judged by their character and effort rather than their appearance. She had faced ridicule and emerged as a champion. But, more importantly, she had created a legacy that would inspire countless others to pursue their own unexpected dreams. As she watched Jessica take her first careful shots with the same .22 caliber pistol she had used months earlier, Sarah realized that her greatest victory wasn't the gold medal or the records she had broken. It was the knowledge that she had helped create a place where the next nervous beginner would find encouragement instead of mockery, support instead of skepticism. The reveal that had surprised everyone wasn't just her extraordinary shooting ability. It was the discovery that excellence, determination, and championship potential could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances, changing not just one life, but an entire community's perspective on what was truly possible. The bullseye shot drew gasps and murmurs of appreciation from the growing crowd at Thunder Valley Gun Range. Frank walked over to Sarah's lane, shaking his head in disbelief as he studied the target through his binoculars. In 30 years of running this place, I've never seen a first-timer put a round dead center like that. You absolutely sure you haven't been practicing somewhere else? Sarah lowered the .38 revolver, keeping it pointed downrange as she had been taught. I promise you, this is my first time. I was actually terrified to come here today. Ruth moved closer, her experienced eye examining the target. Sarah, that's not just lucky shooting. You've got something special here. Your stance is natural, your grip is instinctive, and your breathing control is better than students I've worked with for months. An older gentleman with a distinguished gray beard approached from across the range. He wore a simple polo shirt and khakis, but something about his bearing suggested military experience. Excuse me, miss. I couldn't help but notice your shooting. I'm retired Army, spent 25 years training marksmen. Mind if I ask you a question? Of course, Sarah replied, setting the revolver down on the counter with the cylinder open. When you aim, what are you thinking about? Most beginners overthink every element, but you seem to have a natural process. Sarah considered the question carefully. I guess I just focus on making everything line up perfectly. The front sight, the rear sight, the center of the target. Everything else kind of fades away, and I can feel when it's right. The retired soldier nodded slowly. That's called natural point of aim, and most people have to train for years to develop that kind of instinctive alignment. You were born with it. Word continued to spread throughout the facility. Shooters from other lanes were finding excuses to walk past Lane 7, hoping to catch another demonstration of the newcomer's unexpected skill. Frank found himself in the unusual position of defending a customer he had initially dismissed. I'm telling you, Bob, she put 5 rounds in a 2-inch group with the .22, then stepped up to the .38 and drilled the 10 ring. No coaching, no correction, just pure natural ability. Bob, another regular customer, remained skeptical. Come on, Frank. Nobody shoots like that their first time. She's got to be pulling your leg about being a beginner. Sarah overheard the conversation and felt compelled to address the doubt. Sir, I understand why this seems impossible. If someone told me this story, I probably wouldn't believe it either. But I can show you my driver's license, my credit card statements, anything that proves I've never been to a gun range before today. That won't be necessary, Ruth interjected firmly. I've been teaching firearms for over a decade, and I can spot natural talent when I see it. This young lady has something you can't fake or learn overnight. A commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. 3 men in expensive tactical gear had entered, their conversation loud and boastful. They carried custom rifles in hard cases and wore matching team shirts that read Precision Shooting Club. This place still letting amateurs waste ammunition? One of them announced to no one in particular. Maybe we should have gone to the professional range instead. Frank's jaw tightened. The Precision Shooting Club members were technically skilled shooters, but their attitudes had worn thin with most of the regular customers. They treated Thunder Valley as beneath their standards, yet continued to use the facility when their preferred range was booked. Well, the apparent leader of the group said, noticing Sarah's setup. Looks like someone's playing dress-up today. Let me guess, Instagram photo shoot. Sarah felt the familiar heat of embarrassment, but found her voice stronger than before. Actually, I'm here to learn how to shoot. Learn to shoot. The man laughed, looking at his companions for support. Sweetheart, shooting isn't something you pick up in an afternoon. It takes years of dedicated training, proper equipment, and the right mindset. This isn't a hobby for people like you. Ruth stepped forward, her expression dangerous. People like what exactly? The man backtracked slightly, realizing he had misjudged his audience. I just meant people without experience. No offense intended. Frank had heard enough. Actually, you might want to take a look at her target before you write her off. Sarah here has been impressing everyone with some exceptional shooting. The precision shooting club leader glanced dismissively at Sarah's target, then stopped mid-turn to look again. He walked closer, studying the tight groupings and the perfect bullseye shot. This is from today? From someone who claims to be a beginner. First time touching a firearm, Sarah confirmed quietly. Lucky shots, he declared, though his voice lacked conviction. Anyone can get lucky once or twice. The retired Army veteran stepped forward. Son, I've trained thousands of shooters in my career. Lucky shots don't group like that, and lucky shots don't improve consistently over the course of an afternoon. Prove it, the club leader challenged, his competitive nature taking over. If she's really as good as you all claim, let's see her handle something more challenging than a basic pistol. Ruth looked concerned. Now hold on. Sarah's only been shooting for 2 hours. There's no need to push beyond what she's comfortable with. But Sarah surprised everyone by speaking up. What kind of challenge? The man smiled, sensing an opportunity to restore his superiority. My rifle. Custom built for precision shooting, worth more than most people's cars. If you're really a natural like everyone says, you should be able to handle it. Frank tried to intervene. That's completely unnecessary. Sarah's done excellent work today, and there's no reason to. I'll try it, Sarah interrupted. If you're willing to teach me how to use it safely. The range fell completely silent. Even shooters from the far end of the building had drifted over to see what was happening. The precision shooting club leader found himself in an unexpected position. He had issued a challenge that was accepted, and now he had to follow through. Fine, he said, opening his rifle case. This is a custom .308 with a high-end scope. Effective range out to 800 meters in the right hands. We'll set up a target at 100 meters and see what happens. As he assembled the rifle, explaining each component and safety feature, Sarah listened with the same intense focus she had shown during the safety video. The weapon was significantly more complex than the handguns she had been using, but she absorbed every instruction. The scope is already zeroed for this distance, he explained. Just look through it, center the crosshairs on your target, control your breathing, and squeeze the trigger straight back. He set up a fresh target at the 100-meter mark, then handed Sarah the rifle. The weapon was heavier than she expected, but she adjusted quickly to the different balance and weight distribution. Take your time, Ruth advised quietly. Remember what you learned about breathing and trigger control. The principles are the same regardless of the weapon. Sarah settled into a prone position behind the rifle, adjusting the stock against her shoulder and finding a comfortable position. Through the scope, the distant target appeared much larger and clearer. She took several deep breaths, allowing her heart rate to slow. The first shot broke cleanly, and even from 100 meters away, they could see the hole appear in the target. Frank walked downrange to check the placement while Sarah remained in position, the rifle still pointed safely toward the target. 8 ring, just left of center, Frank called back. Excellent shot for someone learning a new weapon system. The precision shooting club leader's expression had changed from smug confidence to genuine concern. Beginner's luck. Let's see her do it again. Sarah fired 4 more rounds, each one improving on the last. Her final shot struck the 10 ring, just off the X center. When Frank returned with the target, the 5-shot group measured less than 3 inches. This is impossible, one of the club members muttered. Nobody shoots like this without years of training. The retired Army veteran examined the target carefully. Son, I've seen competitive shooters with decades of experience who can't group this tight with an unfamiliar rifle. What we're witnessing here is exceptionally rare. Sarah stood up from the rifle, her legs slightly shaky from the adrenaline. The entire range had gathered around her lane, creating an impromptu semicircle of amazed spectators. The morning sun streaming through the windows seemed to spotlight her position. How? The precision shooting club leader asked, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine bewilderment. How does someone with zero experience shoot like this? Ruth smiled proudly. Some people are born to teach, others to heal, others to lead. Sarah was born to shoot. It's as simple and as rare as that. Frank was already making plans in his head. Sarah, I hope you'll consider coming back. With proper training and practice, you could compete at the highest levels. As the crowd began to disperse, each person stopping to congratulate Sarah and share their amazement. She realized that her morning had changed more than just her opinion about firearms. She had discovered something about herself that nobody could have predicted. The precision shooting club leader approached one final time, his attitude completely transformed. "I owe you an apology. And if you're ever interested in competitive shooting, our club could use someone with your natural ability." Sarah smiled, feeling a confidence she had never experienced before. "I think I might be very interested in that." Sarah Martinez stepped out of her silver Honda Civic and into the gravel parking lot of Thunder Valley Gun Range. The morning sun cast long shadows across the weathered building, and the sound of distant gunfire echoed through the Texas hills. She clutched her small black purse tighter, feeling the weight of the range fee money inside. At 28 years old, Sarah had never fired a gun in her life, but circumstances had changed everything. 3 months earlier, her apartment had been broken into while she slept. The intruder had been caught, but the feeling of helplessness haunted her dreams. Her brother Miguel had suggested she learn to protect herself, and after weeks of hesitation, she finally agreed to visit the gun range. Sarah wore a simple floral sundress and canvas sneakers, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked more like someone heading to a coffee shop than a shooting range. As she approached the entrance, 2 men in camouflage clothing emerged, their conversation stopping abruptly when they saw her. "You lost, sweetheart?" one of them asked with a smirk. "The shopping mall is about 10 miles back that way." Sarah felt her cheeks burn but managed a polite smile. "I'm actually here for the range." The second man chuckled. "First time, huh? Well, don't worry. They've got some nice little pink guns in there that might suit you better than the real stuff." She nodded quietly and walked past them into the building. The interior smelled of gun oil and leather, with glass cases displaying various firearms along the walls. Behind the counter stood a burly man with graying hair and suspicious eyes. "Help you?" he asked without looking up from his paperwork. "I'd like to rent a lane, please. And maybe a basic handgun for practice." Now he looked up, taking in her appearance with obvious skepticism. "You ever shot before?" "No, sir." He sighed heavily. "Look, lady, this isn't a game. These are real weapons, not toys. Maybe you should try one of those laser tag places instead." "I understand they're real weapons," Sarah said quietly. "That's exactly why I'm here." The man shook his head, but pulled out a rental form. "Name?" "Sarah Martinez." "Well, Miss Martinez, I'm going to need to see some ID, and you'll need to watch a safety video. After that, I'll set you up with our smallest caliber pistol. Something that won't knock you over when you pull the trigger." Sarah handed over her driver's license and credit card. While he processed the paperwork, she could hear snickering from other customers who had overheard the conversation. A group of 3 men in their 40s were setting up at a nearby table, cleaning their own weapons. "Hey, Frank," one of them called to the man behind the counter. "Make sure you give the little lady some extra padding. Those .22s can be real brutal." More laughter filled the air. Sarah kept her eyes down, focusing on signing the waiver forms. The safety video played on a small television, explaining basic range rules and firearm handling. She watched intently, memorizing every instruction. 20 minutes later, Frank led her to lane 7, carrying a small black pistol and a box of ammunition. "This here's a Ruger .22 caliber. About as gentle as they come. Try not to drop it when it goes off." He demonstrated how to load the magazine and chamber a round, speaking slowly, as if she might not understand basic concepts. Several other shooters had gathered to watch the show, whispering among themselves. "Now, when you're ready to shoot, just aim down range and squeeze the trigger slow and steady. Don't jerk it or you'll miss the whole target. And whatever you do, don't close your eyes when you shoot." "I've seen ladies do that before." Sarah nodded and accepted the pistol. It felt heavier than she expected, but she gripped it firmly and raised it toward the target. The range felt unusually quiet as everyone waited to see what would happen. She took a deep breath, aligned the sights just as the video had shown, and slowly squeezed the trigger. The gun fired with a sharp crack, and a small hole appeared in the outer ring of the target. Not perfect, but she had hit the paper. "Well, I'll be damned," Frank muttered. "Actually hit something." "Beginner's luck," one of the watching men said loudly. "Let's see her do it again." Sarah reloaded and fired again. This time the bullet struck closer to the center. Then, again and again. Each shot improved slightly, her natural focus beginning to show. By the time she finished the first magazine, she had grouped most of her shots within the inner rings of the target. The chatter around her had died down. Frank was studying her target through a pair of binoculars, frowning with concentration. That's actually pretty decent shooting for a first-timer. Thank you, Sarah said simply, beginning to reload. An older woman approached from the lane beside her. Unlike the men, she wore regular street clothes and had a kind smile. I'm Ruth. Been shooting here for about 15 years. That's some nice grouping you've got there. I'm Sarah. Thank you for saying that. Don't mind these boys, Ruth said, glancing at the still-watching men. They think anyone who doesn't look like a Navy SEAL can't possibly know which end of a gun is which. Where'd you learn to shoot? I haven't learned anywhere. This is actually my first time touching a firearm. Ruth raised her eyebrows. No kidding? Well, you've got natural talent then. Most people scatter shots all over the place their first time out. Frank overheard and walked back over. You sure you've never shot before? Because that grouping is better than some people who've been coming here for months. I'm positive. I grew up in a family that didn't believe in guns. My parents thought they were too dangerous for regular people to own. What changed your mind? Ruth asked gently. Sarah hesitated, then decided to share. Someone broke into my apartment a few months ago. I was there alone, completely defenseless. I never want to feel that helpless again. The mood around her shifted slightly. Several of the men nodded with understanding, their earlier mockery replaced by something approaching respect. Frank cleared his throat. Well, if you're serious about learning, you might want to consider some proper instruction. Ruth here actually teaches basic firearms classes. I'd be happy to work with you, Ruth offered. You've got excellent hand-eye coordination, and you're clearly a quick learner. With some proper training, you could become a really good shooter. Sarah finished her second magazine, again improving with each shot. Word was spreading through the range about the newcomer in the sundress who could actually hit what she was aiming at. More people drifted over to watch, their attitudes ranging from curious to impressed. A young man in his early 20s approached with his father. Excuse me, miss. My dad and I were wondering if you might be interested in trying something with a little more challenge? We've got a .38 special if you'd like to see how you do with a bigger caliber. His father nodded encouragingly. Son's right. You've clearly got the basics down. Might be time to step up and see what you can really do. Sarah looked at the offered revolver, then at the growing crowd around her lane. The atmosphere had completely changed from when she first walked in. Instead of mockery and dismissal, she now saw genuine interest and respect. I think I'd like that, she said, accepting the larger pistol. As she examined the new weapon, checking to make sure it was unloaded as Frank had taught her, several experienced shooters began offering tips and encouragement. The same men who had made jokes about pink guns were now discussing proper stance and breathing techniques. Take your time, Ruth advised. This one's got more kick than the .22, but I have a feeling you'll handle it just fine. Sarah raised the .38 and took aim. The range fell silent again, but this time the quiet was filled with anticipation rather than skepticism. She had come here as a complete beginner, expecting to struggle through her first lesson. Instead, she was discovering something about herself that nobody, least of all Sarah, had expected. The trigger pull was heavier than the .22, but she adjusted instinctively. When she fired, the recoil was stronger, but she maintained her grip and her stance. The bullet struck just left of center on the target. Outstanding, Frank called out. That's excellent shooting, especially for someone moving up in caliber. Sarah smiled genuinely for the first time since entering the building. She was beginning to understand that she might have found something she was naturally good at, something that could give her the confidence and skill she needed to never feel helpless again. As she prepared to fire her second shot with the .38, she noticed that every conversation in the range had stopped. All attention was focused on Lane 7, where a young woman in a floral dress was quietly proving that assumptions about who could and couldn't handle firearms were often completely wrong. The bullet struck dead center in the bullseye,